time, the crews were ready. When the call went out over the telephone net that a UFO had been spotted, all of the crews scanned the sky. 2 of the crews saw it and shot several feet of film as the shiny, bright object streaked across the sky. As soon as the missile tests were completed, the camera crews rushed their film to the processing lab and then but once again the UFO had eluded man because there were apparently 2 or more UFOs in the sky, and each camera station had photographed a separate one. The data were no good for triangulation. The records at ATIC didn't contain the analysis of these films, but they did mention the data reduction group at White Sands. So when I later took over the UFO investigation, I made several calls in an effort to run down the actual film and the analysis. The files at White Sands, like all files, evidently weren't very good because the original reports were gone. I did contact a major who was very cooperative and offered to try to find the people who had worked on the analysis of the film. His report, after talking to 2 men who had done the analysis, was what I'd expected, nothing concrete except that the UFOs were unknowns. He did say that by putting a correction factor in the data gathered by the 2 cameras, they were able to arrive at a rough estimate of speed, altitude, and size. The UFO was higher than 40,000 feet, traveling over 2,000 miles per hour, and it was over 300 feet in diameter. He cautioned me, however, that these figures were only estimates based on the possibly erroneous correction factor. Therefore, they weren't proof of anything, except that something was in the air. The people at White Sands continued to be on the alert for UFOs while the camera stations were in operation because they realized that if the flight path of a UFO could be accurately plotted and timed, it could be positively identified. But no more UFOs showed up. One day, Lieutenant Cummings came over to my desk and dropped a stack of reports in front of me. "All radar reports," he said, "and I'm getting more and more of them every day." Radar reports, I knew, had always been a controversial point in UFO history, and if more and more radar reports were coming in, there was no doubt that an already controversial issue was going to be compounded. To understand why there is always some disagreement whenever a flying saucer is picked up on radar, it is necessary to know a little bit about how radar operates. Basically, radar is nothing but a piece of electronic equipment that shouts out a radio wave and listens for the echo. By knowing how fast the radio, or radar, wave travels and from which direction the echo is coming, the radar tells the direction and distance of the object that is causing the echo. Any solid object like an airplane, bird, ship, or even a moisture-laden cloud can cause a radar echo. When the echo comes back to the radar set, the radar operator doesn't have to listen for it and time it because this is all done for him by the radar set and he sees the answer on his radar scope, a kind of a round TV screen. What the radar operator sees is a bright dot called a blip or a return. The location of the return on the scope tells him the location of the object that was causing the echo. As the object moves through the sky, the radar operator sees a series of bright dots on his scope that makes a track. On some radar sets, the altitude of the target, the object causing the echo, can also be measured. Under normal conditions, the path that the radar waves takes as they travel through the air is known. Normal conditions are when the temperature and relative humidity of the air decrease with an increase in altitude. But sometimes a condition will occur where at some level, instead of the temperature and/or relative humidity decreasing with altitude, it will begin to increase. This layer of warm, moist air is known as an inversion layer, and it can do all kinds of crazy things to a radar wave. It can cause part of the radar wave to travel in a big arc and actually pick up the ground many miles away. Or it can cause the wave to bend down just enough to pick up trucks, cars, houses, or anything that has a surface perpendicular to the ground level. One would immediately think that since the ground or a house isn't moving, and a car or truck is moving only 40, 50, or 60 miles an hour, a radar operator should be able to pick these objects out from a fast-moving target. But it isn't as simple as that. The inversion layer shimmers and moves, and 1 second the radar may be picking up the ground or a truck in one spot, and the next second it may be picking up something in a different spot. This causes a series of returns on the scope and can give the illusion of extremely fast or slow speeds. These are but a few of the effects of an inversion layer on radar. Some of the effects are well known, but others aren't. The 3rd Weather Group at Air Defense Command Headquarters in Colorado Springs has done a lot of work on the effects of weather on radar, and they have developed mathematical formulas for telling how favorable weather conditions are for anomalous propagation, the 2-bit words for false radar targets caused by weather. The first problem in analyzing reports of UFOs being picked up on radar is to determine if the weather conditions are right to give anomalous propagation. This can be determined by putting weather data into a formula. If they are, then it is necessary to determine whether the radar targets were real or caused by the weather. This is the difficult job. In most cases, the only answer is the appearance of the target on the radar scope. Many times a weather spot on the scope, while a real target, an airplane for example, will be bright and sharp. This question of whether a target looked real is the cause of the majority of the arguments about radar-detected UFOs, because it is up to the judgment of the radar operator as to what the target looked like. And whenever human judgment is involved in a decision, there is plenty of room for an argument. All during the early summer of 1951, Lieutenant Cummings fought the syndicate trying to make the UFO respectable. All the time, I was continuing to get my indoctrination. Then, one day, with the speed of a shotgun wedding, the long overdue respectability arrived. The date was September 12, 1951, and the exact time was 3:04 p.m. On this date and time, a teletype machine at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base began to chatter out a message. 36 inches of paper rolled out of the machine before the operator ripped off the copy, stamped it "Operational Immediate," and gave it to a special messenger to deliver to ATIC. Lieutenant Cummings got the message. The report was from the Army Signal Corps Radar Center at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, and it was red hot. The incident had started 2 days before, on September 10th, at 11:10 a.m., when a student operator was giving a demonstration to a group of visiting brass at the radar school. He demonstrated the set under manual operation for a while, picking up local air traffic. Then he announced that he would demonstrate automatic tracking, in which the set is put on a target and follows it without help from the operator. The set could track objects flying at jet speeds. The operator spotted an object about 12,000 yards southeast of the station, flying low toward the north. He tried to switch the set to automatic tracking. He failed, tried again, failed again. He turned to his audience of VIPs, embarrassed. "It's going too fast for the set," he said. "That means it's going faster than a jet." A lot of very important eyebrows lifted. What flies faster than a jet? The object was in range for 3 minutes, and the operator kept trying, without success, to get into automatic track. The target finally went off the scope, leaving the red-faced operator talking to himself. The radar technicians at Fort Monmouth had checked the weather. There wasn't the slightest indication of an inversion layer. 25 minutes later, the pilot of a T-33 jet trainer, carrying an Air Force major as passenger and flying 20,000 feet over Point Pleasant, New Jersey, spotted a dull silver disc-like object far below him. He described it as 30 to 50 feet in diameter and as descending toward Sandy Hook from an altitude of a mile or so. He banked the T-33 over and started down after it. As he shot down, he reported, the object stopped its descent, hovered, then sped south, made a 120-degree turn, and vanished out to sea. The Fort Monmouth incident then switched back to the radar group. At 3:15 p.m., they got an excited, almost frantic call from headquarters to pick up a target high and to the north, which was where the first faster-than-a-jet object had vanished, and to pick it up in a hurry. They got a fix on it and reported that it was traveling slowly at 93,000 feet. They also could see it visually as a silver speck. What flies 18 miles above the Earth? The next morning, 2 radar sets picked up another target that couldn't be tracked automatically. It would climb, level off, climb again, go into a dive. When it climbed, it went almost straight up. The 2-day sensation ended that afternoon when the radar tracked another unidentified slow-moving object and tracked it for several minutes. A copy of the message had also gone to Washington. Before Jerry could digest the 36 inches of facts, ATIC's new chief, Colonel Frank Dunn, got a phone call. It came from the office of the Director of Intelligence of the Air Force, Major General, now Lieutenant General, C.P. Cabell. General Cabell wanted somebody from ATIC to get to New Jersey fast and find out what was going on. As soon as the reports had been thoroughly investigated, the general said that he wanted a complete personal report. Nothing expedites like a telephone call from a general officer, so in a matter of hours, Lieutenant Cummings and Lieutenant Colonel N.R. Rosengarten were on an airliner, New Jersey bound. The 2 officers worked around the clock interrogating the radar operators, their instructors, and the technicians at Fort Monmouth. The pilot who had chased the UFO in the T-33 trainer and his passenger were flown to New York, and they talked to Cummings and Rosengarten. All other radar stations in the area were checked, but their radars hadn't picked up anything unusual. At about 4:00 a.m., the second morning after they had arrived, the investigation was completed, Cummings later told. He and Lieutenant Colonel Rosengarten couldn't get an airliner out of New York in time to get them to the Pentagon by 10 o'clock.